In our last conversation, we walked together through the graveyard of hobbies, looking at the half-finished canvases and the guitars with dusty strings that serve as silent monuments to the things we once swore would be our life's passion. We looked at the neuroscience of quitting and laid out a plan to build that specific muscle of tenacity, the anterior mid-cingulate cortex, which allows us to push through when the initial dopamine hit of a new project evaporates. But for many of you, a different and arguably more confusing problem emerged, a problem that isn't about a lack of grit, but a surplus of vision. You find yourself sitting at your desk at 9 o'clock in the morning with a list of noble intentions, only to find that it is suddenly 2 o'clock in the afternoon, and the only thing you've actually accomplished is color-coding your Spotify playlists and researching whether or not squirrels can be left-handed. You haven't been lazy. In fact, you feel utterly exhausted. Your neck is stiff and your eyes are dry, yet the real work hasn't moved an inch. This is the classic scanner's dilemma, the agony of looking at your life and seeing a dozen different paths, the writer, the coder, the gardener, the amateur historian, and feeling like every single one of them is a vital piece of your identity. You aren't afraid of the hard work. You are simply paralyzed by the choice, trapped in a cycle where your greatest strength, your bottomless curiosity, has become your biggest career liability. Society has a rather unkind word for people like us. They call us dilettantes, jacks of all trades but masters of none, and the anxiety that comes with that label can be crushing. It makes us feel like we are constantly failing at a game where the rules were written for someone else entirely. To dismantle this anxiety, we have to pull back the curtain on your neurobiology and meet the overworked, highly expensive CEO of your brain, the prefrontal cortex. In the world of neuropsychology, this region is responsible for what we call executive functions, the ability to plan, to filter out distractions, and most crucially, to make decisions. However, this CEO is running on a very limited battery. Every time you ask your brain to decide which of your 40 open browser tabs to close, or whether you should answer a quick email or finish a paragraph of deep work, you are performing a metabolic withdrawal from your mental bank account. For the introverted multitasker, this problem is amplified because your brain isn't just making a list, it is simulating the entire outcome of every single possibility. You aren't just choosing a task, you are navigating a high-fidelity mental landscape where every choice carries the weight of a life-altering commitment. This phenomenon is known as decision fatigue, and it is the primary reason your brain resists organization. When your working memory is filled with open loops, the unfinished laundry, the unreturned messages, and the 3 different books on your nightstand, your prefrontal cortex becomes terminally overloaded. It is like trying to run the latest high-definition video game on a laptop from 2005. The hardware gets too hot, the system begins to lag, and eventually the CEO simply goes on strike. We call this procrastination, but from a biological perspective, it isn't a character flaw. It's a protective mechanism. Your brain is literally shutting down the system to prevent a total metabolic collapse, leaving you staring at your phone for 3 hours while your to-do list watches you in silent judgment. The reason this feels so painful is that for the last century, our entire social and educational system has been built to praise the specialist, what we might call the I-shaped person. This is the expert who goes a mile deep in one narrow field, thriving in what psychologists call a kind learning environment. In a kind environment, like a chessboard or a golf course, the rules never change, the patterns repeat, and the path to success is found through narrow repetition. But the world you actually inhabit, especially if you find yourself drawn to multiple interests, is a wicked learning environment. In a wicked world, the rules change constantly, feedback is delayed, and the patterns are hidden beneath layers of noise. Think of the difference between a golfer and a firefighter. A golfer operates in a predictable world where specialization is king, but a firefighter works in a world where every situation is new, and specialized knowledge from the last fire might not apply to the next one. In a wicked world, the hyper-specialist often develops dangerous blind spots, whereas the person with a broad range of interests possesses a cognitive superpower called far transfer. This is the ability to see the underlying structure in one field, say the harmony in a piece of music, and apply it to a completely different field, like the structure of a software database. You have been blaming yourself for being distracted, when in reality, your brain is simply built to be a bridge builder between different worlds of knowledge. The weight you are carrying isn't actually the volume of work you have to do. It is the mental friction caused by trying to manage all those worlds simultaneously without a map. Most organizational advice fails you because it tries to force your M-shaped, polymathic brain into a single, rigid, I-shaped box. You try to use the planners and the apps that promise to optimize your flow, but you find that they only add to the cognitive load, creating more decisions about how to organize the organization. To reverse this resistance, we have to stop trying to change your brain and instead start changing your operating system. We need to move away from the idea of management and toward a state of relaxed intensity, where your brain is finally free to create rather than just carry. This shift begins when we recognize that your working memory is a small, crowded workbench. If you don't move the finished projects and the fleeting obsessions off the bench, there is no room left to build anything new. Trying to keep it all in your head is a recipe for a total system override. And until we flush the brain's cache and clear the extrinsic load of mental noise, you will remain stuck in that state of brain lag, exhausted by the mere thought of starting. To stop this cycle of systemic failure, we must first address the chemical architecture of your motivation, specifically the way your reward system has been hijacked by the digital equivalent of high-fructose corn syrup. In the modern world, your brain is like a high-end stereo system that has had the volume blasted at 100% for far too long, causing the system to protect itself by turning down its internal sensitivity. This is known as down-regulation. When you are constantly bombarded by the erratic dopamine spikes of notifications, infinite scrolls, and rapid-fire context switching, your baseline for what feels stimulating shifts. Consequently, when you sit down to perform the slow, dry work of your deepest projects, the coding, the writing, the strategic planning, your brain perceives it as physically painful because it is stimulation poor. You aren't lazy. You are simply an addict being offered a cracker when your neurobiology is demanding a 5-course feast of novelty. The path to recovery isn't found in a frantic burst of willpower, but in a deliberate recalibration of your boredom threshold, allowing your prefrontal cortex to once again hear the quiet music of deep focus. This recalibration begins with a process of psychological closure, utilizing a biological cheat code discovered in a Berlin cafe nearly a century ago. Bluma Zygarnik noticed that waiters had incredible memories for unpaid orders, but the literal millisecond a bill was settled, the details vanished. Your brain is hardwired to keep those open loops active in your high-speed RAM, leaking energy as it pings you with reminders of everything left undone. However, the secret discovered by modern researchers is that you don't actually have to finish the task to stop the leak. You just need a trusted plan for it. When you move an idea or a task from your head into an external system, a digital garden or a physical journal, you are performing a tactical brain dump that sends a neurological signal to the CEO of your brain. It is safe to forget this. This instantly flushes the cache, reclaiming the cognitive capacity you've been losing to background residue. By externalizing your executive function, you move from being a storage device to being a processor, allowing your working memory to finally breathe. Once the RAM is cleared, we can begin to address the geometry of your life by embracing the concept of serial mastery. The scanner's greatest fear is being trapped in a single narrow pillar for the next 40 years, a thought that creates an immediate claustrophobic reaction in the prefrontal cortex. To fix this, you must adopt the M-shaped model, where your life consists of 2 or 3 deep legs of mastery, connected by a broad horizontal bar of curiosity. The key is to stop trying to build all your pillars at once, which only leads back to the shallow, anxious state of knowing a little about everything and nothing about anything. Instead, you choose one pillar for a season, perhaps 6 to 18 months, and give yourself full permission to pour your focus there until you reach a level of fluency where the instruction manual is no longer needed. This isn't quitting, it is a graduation. By assigning your diverse interests to the horizontal bar of your weekends and evenings, you reduce the metabolic tax of decision fatigue while still honoring the bridge-building nature of your brain. To support this M-shaped life, you may need to fundamentally reframe your relationship with your day job, moving away from the high-passion, high-stress traps that consume 110% of your cognitive energy. Many of the world's greatest polymaths, including Albert Einstein, understood that a low-drain job is a strategic asset. By working as a patent clerk, Einstein secured the stable ground that allowed his mind to wander the universe during his working hours. If your primary pillar of stability leaves you fried by 5 o'clock, you have no resources left for the far transfer breakthroughs that occur when your brain connects seemingly random interests. You organize the boring stuff, the schedule, the administration, the physical environment, not to become a specialist, but to protect the energy of the integrator. This environmental engineering extends to your physical stage. By maintaining a 20-inch radius of absolute visual silence around your workspace, you deactivate the amygdala's smoke detector, telling your nervous system that the perimeter is secure and it is finally safe to think. Ultimately, you must realize that you were never meant to be a single narrow gear in someone else's machine. You were designed to be the person who sees how everything connects, the one who can weave the history of technology into the data of the future. The self-blame you have carried for so long, the feeling that your curiosity is a distraction, is actually a misunderstanding of your greatest strategic advantage. Your potential isn't limited by your lack of grit, it is limited by the mental friction of an unmanaged operating system. When your cognitive burden is 0 because you have externalized the weight and engineered your environment for safety, your creative potential becomes truly infinite. Stop trying to willpower your way through a biological strike. Stop being a waiter who can't forget the orders from 3 tables ago. Reclaim your dopamine, close your loops, and start building the bridge between worlds that only you can see. The world doesn't need more especialistas. It needs the scanners who have finally learned how to fix their fried brains and lead the way into the complex, wicked reality of the future.